My name is Gabriella, and I'm 25 years old. For as long as I can remember, birthdays in our family have followed the same pattern. My brother Daniel gets the latest tech gadgets. My sister Jessica receives designer clothes and jewelry. And me, I get practical items like body wash or school supplies. I used to tell myself it didn't matter that I didn't need expensive gifts to feel loved. But as I pack my boxes to move out of my family home, I'm finally confronting the truth. The disparity was never about the gifts. It was about my worth in their eyes. If you're watching this right now, drop a comment, letting me know where you're from. And if you've ever felt like the least favorite in your family, hit that like and subscribe button. Trust me, you're not alone in this journey. I grew up in Brookline, an affluent suburb just outside of Boston, in what most people would consider a picture-perfect family. Our 5-bedroom colonial, with its meticulously manicured lawn and backyard pool, was the envy of the neighborhood. My father, Michael, built a successful career as a corporate lawyer, while my mother, Catherine, worked as a respected pediatrician at Boston Children's Hospital. From the outside looking in, we had it all. My earliest memories are filled with the subtle signs that something wasn't quite equal in how my siblings and I were treated, though I couldn't articulate it then. When I was 7, Daniel, who's 2 years older than me, was struggling with math. His grades improved from a C to a B, and our parents rewarded him with the latest PlayStation console. That same year, I got straight A's and brought home a perfect report card. My reward, a dictionary, because a good student needs proper resources. When my younger sister Jessica showed interest in art at age 9, our parents immediately enrolled her in private lessons with a renowned local artist. They bought her professional-grade supplies and converted our spare room into a studio space for her. A year later, when I developed a passion for photography, my request for a camera was met with, "It's just a phase, Gabriella. Let's wait and see if you're still interested in a few months." I saved my allowance for 2 years to buy a second-hand camera. Family vacations followed the same pattern. Daniel wanted to visit the Baseball Hall of Fame, so we spent 3 days in Cooperstown. Jessica wanted to see Broadway shows, so we made a special trip to New York. When I suggested visiting the National Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C., my mother said, "Maybe next time, sweetheart. We need to focus on your father's conference this trip." The explanations always made the favoritism seem logical, reasonable even. Daniel needs extra encouragement with school. Jessica has a real talent that should be nurtured. Gabriella is already so self-motivated, she doesn't need external rewards. I became the easy child, the one who didn't make waves, who didn't need special attention or expensive things. I was low-maintenance, responsible, mature for my age. These were the compliments I received, the identity I adopted, and eventually, the prison I built for myself. I threw myself into academics and extracurriculars, hoping that excellence would finally earn me the same level of attention and investment my siblings received. I joined the debate team, volunteered at the local library, maintained a perfect GPA, and even started a tutoring program for underprivileged kids. My achievements were acknowledged with nods and perfunctory praise, but never celebrated with the enthusiasm that greeted Daniel's mediocre sports victories or Jessica's art show participations. By the time I reached high school, I had convinced myself that this was normal. I told myself I was being materialistic for caring about gifts. I reminded myself that my parents provided for my basic needs and paid for my education. I had a roof over my head, food on the table, and clothes on my back. What right did I have to complain about not getting the latest iPhone when there were children who didn't have enough to eat? But deep down, in a place I rarely allowed myself to visit, I knew it wasn't about the material items. It was about what they represented. Every time Daniel or Jessica opened an extravagant gift, while I received something practical, the message was clear: they were worth the expense, the thought, the effort to make them happy. I was not. Still, I became adept at hiding my hurt. I would smile and thank my parents for whatever token gift they'd given me, then retreat to my room where I could process my feelings in private. I kept a journal where I documented every instance of unequal treatment, not out of bitterness, but as a reality check. Sometimes I wondered if I was imagining things, if I was being overly sensitive or ungrateful. The journal entries reassured me that no, I wasn't making it up. The pattern was real, consistent, and painful. As my high school years progressed, I developed close friendships outside my family and found validation in those relationships. My best friend Leah, whose parents treated their 3 children with remarkable equality, often expressed shock at the stories I shared. "That's not right, Gabby," she would say. "Your parents shouldn't play favorites like that." I also found solace in my part-time job at a local bookstore. I started working at 16 not because we needed the money, but because I wanted to buy things for myself without having to ask my parents. The independence was liberating. For the first time, I could make decisions about what I wanted without having to justify my desires or face rejection. If I wanted to spend my hard-earned money on a concert ticket or a new pair of shoes, I could do so without hearing, "That's not really necessary, is it, Gabriella?" The bookstore job also introduced me to Amanda, the manager, who became something of a mentor to me. In her mid-30s, childless by choice, Amanda had navigated her own complicated family dynamics. "Family is supposed to be where we learn our worth," she told me once. "But sometimes they're where we learn the wrong lessons. It's up to us to unlearn them." I tried to take her words to heart, but the lessons of my childhood were deeply ingrained. By the time I graduated high school, I had accepted my place in the family hierarchy. I was the reliable one, the independent one, the one who didn't need much. It was a role I played to perfection, even as it hollowed me out from the inside. As I entered my late teens, the pattern of favoritism that had been established in my childhood became increasingly blatant. It was no longer subtle differences in attention or opportunities. Now it was displayed in material terms that were impossible to rationalize away. Daniel's 16th birthday arrived with tremendous fanfare. My parents threw him a massive party at an upscale venue, inviting his entire grade and hiring a professional DJ. The highlight of the evening was when my father handed him keys to a brand new Audi A3. Not a used car, not a practical family vehicle, but a luxury compact that made his friends whistle in appreciation. "You're becoming a man now," my father said proudly. "A man needs reliable transportation." 2 years later, when Jessica turned 16, my parents surprised her with a 2-week trip to Paris. "To immerse yourself in art and culture," my mother explained, as Jessica squealed with delight, clutching the envelope containing first-class plane tickets and reservations at a boutique hotel near the Louvre. "Your artistic soul needs nourishment." My 16th birthday fell between theirs. I received a set of SAT prep books and a graphing calculator. "For your college applications," my father said, as if this explained everything. "We know how important your education is to you." No party, no significant celebration. My mother made my favorite dinner and baked a cake, and that was deemed sufficient. The disparities continued with every milestone. Christmas was particularly revealing. One year, Daniel received a MacBook Pro for college. Jessica got an iPad Pro with the Apple Pencil for her digital art. And I unwrapped a planner with my name embossed on the cover. When my grandmother questioned the obvious inequality, my mother smoothly replied, "Gabriella prefers practical gifts. She's not materialistic like most girls her age." For high school graduation, Daniel was gifted a Tag Heuer watch. "Something timeless to mark this moment," my father said. Jessica received a MacBook Pro with all the software she needed for her design courses. I got a leather portfolio for job interviews. "Because we know you'll be successful," my mother added, as if this was the highest compliment. By this point, the pattern was so established that I anticipated the disappointment before each gift-giving occasion. I had learned to lower my expectations to avoid the sting, yet somehow it always hurt anyway. Not because I desperately wanted expensive things, but because the message was consistent my siblings were worth the expense, the thought, the desire to bring them joy. I was worth only what was practical, necessary, utilitarian. Friends started to notice and make comments. Didn't your brother get a car at your age? Or, wait, your sister went to Paris, but you've never been out of the country. I became adept at making excuses. I'm saving for my own car, I'd say. Or, I'm more interested in exploring the US first. Lies to cover my family's lies. It wasn't just friends who noticed. Extended family saw it too. My Aunt Susan, my mother's sister, once confronted my parents after a particularly unbalanced Christmas. I overheard her in the kitchen, voice low but intense. "What are you doing to that girl? Do you even see how you treat her differently?" My mother's response was defensive. "We know our children, Susan. They each have different needs and interests. Gabriella doesn't care about material things." "Have you ever asked her what she cares about?" Aunt Susan shot back. "Or have you just decided for her?" The argument escalated until my father stepped in, his voice cold. "We don't tell you how to raise your kids, Susan. I suggest you extend us the same courtesy." After that, holiday gatherings had an undercurrent of tension. Aunt Susan made a point of giving me especially thoughtful gifts, often experiences we could share together. Concert tickets, cooking classes, weekend trips to nearby cities. She became my ally, though I was careful not to exploit that alliance. I didn't want to be accused of turning family members against my parents. Strangely, I often found myself defending my parents to others while privately nursing my wounds. They just show love differently, I'd say, or they know I'm independent. Part of me still craved their approval, still wanted to be the good daughter who didn't complain. Another part recognized that acknowledging the favoritism out loud would make it too real, too painful to bear. The impact on my self-esteem was insidious. I began to see myself as inherently less deserving than others. In friendships, I was always the giver, rarely allowing myself to receive. In romantic relationships, I accepted poor treatment because it felt familiar. I dated men who put minimal effort into our relationship, who forgot birthdays and anniversaries, who made me feel exactly as I felt at home, tolerated, but not treasured. I developed coping mechanisms to deal with the chronic disappointment. I focused intensely on academics where objective measures of success couldn't be denied or diminished. I built a support network outside my family, friends, mentors, teachers who saw value in me. I worked part-time jobs throughout college, not just for spending money, but for the satisfaction of buying things for myself without having to ask or be grateful for scraps. But the wound never fully healed. Each birthday, each Christmas, each milestone reopened it, reminding me that in the eyes of the people who should love me most unconditionally, I somehow didn't measure up. I carried this belief with me like a shadow, always present, even when not acknowledged. It colored my perceptions, my choices, my sense of what I deserved from life and from others. As I approached my 25th birthday, I had almost made peace with it. Almost. I had graduated college with honors, been accepted to a prestigious graduate program in clinical psychology, and secured a part-time research position that would help fund my studies. My life was on track despite the emotional baggage I carried. I told myself that family dynamics were complicated, that my parents had done their best, that I had turned out fine anyway. But sometimes, when I was honest with myself in the quiet hours of the night, I admitted the truth. It wasn't fine. I wasn't fine. And something had to change. The dinner reservation was at Sorellina, one of Boston's most upscale Italian restaurants. My mother had chosen it as she did every year for our family birthday celebrations. The fact that I preferred casual dining was irrelevant. Tradition dictated that birthdays were marked at establishments that reflected our family's social standing. I arrived slightly early, having come directly from my research job at the university. I had spent extra time on my appearance that day, wearing a new navy blue dress, I'd purchased specifically for the occasion, my hair styled in loose waves, a touch of makeup enhancing my features. Part of me still believed that if I looked successful enough, put together enough, my parents might finally see me as worthy of the same consideration they gave my siblings. This birthday felt particularly significant. I had recently been accepted to the doctoral program in psychology at Boston University, a competitive program that had admitted only 8 students from a pool of hundreds. It was an achievement I was genuinely proud of, one that I hoped might finally earn me the kind of recognition my parents had always reserved for Daniel and Jessica. My family arrived together, having come from our family home in the same car. My father in his customary suit, my mother elegant in a designer dress, Daniel looking professional after a day at his investment banking job, and Jessica bohemian chic in an outfit that somehow cost a fortune while appearing effortlessly thrown together. They spotted me at the table and approached, each greeting me with varying degrees of enthusiasm. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," my mother said, air-kissing my cheek to avoid smudging her lipstick. 25, my father remarked, giving my shoulder a brief squeeze. "A quarter century. How does it feel to be officially old?" Daniel gave me a quick hug. "Happy birthday, sis. The big 25, huh?" Jessica, always the most physically affectionate of the family, wrapped me in a genuine embrace. "Happy birthday, Gabby. You look amazing." We were joined shortly by my Aunt Susan and her husband, my cousin Amy, and my grandmother, who had insisted on attending despite her declining health. The conversation flowed pleasantly enough through drinks and appetizers, focusing primarily on Daniel's recent promotion and Jessica's upcoming art exhibition. My doctoral program acceptance was mentioned, briefly acknowledged with nods and a quick, "That's nice, dear," from my mother, before the topic shifted back to Jessica's plans for her show. After the main course, the waiter brought out a small cake with a single candle. Everyone sang, "Happy birthday," and I made the obligatory wish before blowing out the flame. Then came the moment I had been simultaneously dreading and hoping might be different this year: the gifts. Daniel went first, sliding a small, elegantly wrapped box across the table. Inside was the latest iPhone, already set up with a premium case. "To replace that dinosaur you're still using," he said with a grin. Jessica handed me a beautifully wrapped package that revealed a pair of designer earrings I had admired when we went shopping together months ago. "I remembered how much you liked them," she said, looking pleased with herself. My parents' gift was last presented in a small gift bag with minimal wrapping. I reached inside and pulled out a set of body wash lotion and fragrance mist from a drugstore brand. The price sticker was still attached to the bottom of the lotion bottle, $8.99 for the set. There was a moment of awkward silence at the table. I forced a smile, thanking them with as much grace as I could muster. But the contrast was so stark, so undeniable, that even my usual well-practiced acceptance faltered. My cousin Amy, always forthright, broke the silence. "Aunt Catherine, why did Gabriella get body wash when Daniel and Jessica got such expensive presents?" The table went silent again. My mother's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Gabriella is practical. She doesn't care about expensive things." My father nodded in agreement. "Plus, she's so busy with school she doesn't have time for gadgets. She needs things that make her life easier." I felt a familiar tightness in my chest, the feeling I always got when trying not to cry in public. I had spent years accepting their explanations, their justifications, their version of who I was and what I deserved. But hearing it stated so baldly in front of extended family, with the evidence of their different standards so clearly displayed on the table before us, something inside me cracked. Still, I maintained my composure through the remainder of the dinner. I thanked everyone for coming, for their gifts, for making my birthday special. I smiled and participated in conversations. I hugged each family member as they departed. I was, as always, the good daughter, the understanding one, the one who didn't make waves. It wasn't until I was alone in my car in the restaurant parking lot that I allowed the tears to come. They streamed down my face as I gripped the steering wheel, great heaving sobs that seemed to rise from the deepest part of me. 25 years of swallowed hurt, of telling myself it didn't matter, of making excuses for being treated as less than. 25 years of watching my siblings receive not just material advantages, but the precious gift of being seen, valued, celebrated for who they were. My phone lit up with a text message. It was from Aunt Susan. "You deserve better. Always have." 4 simple words, but they pierced straight through the protective shell I had built around myself. You deserve better. Not, don't be materialistic. Not, be grateful for what you have. Not, your parents love you in their own way. But a straightforward acknowledgement of the truth I had been denying for so long. I drove home in a kind of daze, my mind racing with memories, patterns, realizations. By the time I pulled into our driveway, a decision had crystallized in my mind with perfect clarity. I couldn't change how my parents saw me or treated me, but I could change how I responded to it. I could change where I lived, what I accepted, how I allowed myself to be treated. It was time to move out. Time to establish boundaries. Time to stop pretending that everything was fine when it so clearly wasn't. As I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling of the bedroom I had occupied since childhood, I felt a strange mixture of grief and determination. The child in me still craved my parents' approval, still wanted to be loved the way they loved my siblings. But the adult I had become knew that staying in this environment was slowly destroying me from the inside out. Tomorrow, I would start looking for an apartment. Tomorrow, I would begin the process of separating myself from the family dynamic that had shaped me for too long. Tomorrow, I would take the first step toward believing what Aunt Susan had said I deserved better. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I opened my laptop and began searching for apartments near Boston University, where I would be starting my doctoral program in the fall. My teaching assistant stipend wasn't generous, but combined with my savings from years of part-time work, it would be enough to afford a modest place of my own. After a few hours of searching, I found a small one-bedroom apartment in Allston, a neighborhood popular with students. It wasn't fancy. The kitchen was outdated, the bathroom tiny, and the whole place needed a fresh coat of paint. But it was clean within my budget, and most importantly, it was mine. I scheduled a viewing for that afternoon, and after a quick tour, put down a deposit on the spot. The landlord seemed pleased to have a graduate student tenant and agreed to let me move in the following week. The decision made, I returned home and began the process of sorting through my belongings. Years of living as the low-maintenance child meant I had accumulated far less than my siblings. While Daniel's room overflowed with expensive electronic sports equipment and designer clothes, and Jessica's was cluttered with art supplies, fashion items, and souvenirs from her travels, my space was relatively sparse. Still, I had 25 years of life to pack up, and I wanted to be methodical about it. I was in the middle of organizing my books into boxes when my mother walked in without knocking, something she had always done despite my repeated requests for privacy. "What are you doing?" she asked, looking confused at the half-packed boxes strewn across my floor. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the conversation I knew would be difficult. "I'm moving out. I found an apartment near campus." "Moving out? But why? You've always lived at home during school. It saves money, and we have plenty of space." Her tone was more bewildered than upset, as if she genuinely couldn't comprehend my decision. "I need my own space, Mom. I'm 25 years old and starting a doctoral program. It's time." She frowned, looking around at my packing progress. "This seems very sudden. Is this because of your birthday? Because you didn't like your gift?" The direct reference to what had always been left unspoken caught me off guard. It's not about the gift, Mom. It's about what the gift represents. What are you talking about? And suddenly, years of carefully contained feelings burst forth. It's about the fact that for my entire life, you and Dad have treated me differently than Daniel and Jessica. It's about Daniel getting a car for his 16th birthday while I got SAT prep books. It's about Jessica going to Paris while I stayed home. It's about Christmas after Christmas, watching them open expensive, thoughtful presents, while I got practical items that showed no real consideration for who I am or what I might want. My mother's face registered shock, then denial. That's absurd. We've always treated all our children the same. No, Mom, you haven't. And what hurts the most isn't even the material difference. It's that you've never taken the time to know me, to see me. You decided who I was. The practical one, the low-maintenance one, the one who doesn't need anything, without ever asking what I might want or need. My voice had risen, and the commotion brought my father to the doorway. "What's going on here?" he demanded. My mother turned to him, her expression a mixture of indignation and distress. "Gabriella is moving out because she thinks we favor Daniel and Jessica over her. She's upset about her birthday gift." My father's brow furrowed. "That's ridiculous. We've given you everything you needed. College tuition, a roof over your head, support for your career. What more do you want?" "I want to be treated with the same consideration and thoughtfulness you show my siblings," I replied, fighting to keep my voice steady. "I want you to put the same effort into understanding me that you put into understanding them." The noise had drawn both Daniel and Jessica, who now hovered uncertainly in the hallway outside my room. "You've always been different, Gabriella," my father continued. "More independent, more focused on your studies. We respected that about you. No, you used it as an excuse to put less effort into your relationship with me. When have you ever asked me what I'm interested in? When have you ever remembered something I mentioned wanting? When have you ever celebrated my achievements with the same enthusiasm you show for Daniel's or Jessica's?" Daniel stepped into the room looking uncomfortable. "Come on, guys, let's all calm down. I'm sure this is just a misunderstanding." But Jessica surprised me by speaking up. "It's not a misunderstanding, Daniel. Gabby's right. We've all seen it, we just never talk about it." She turned to our parents. "You do treat her differently. You always have. And I've always felt guilty about it, but I never knew how to bring it up." My parents looked shocked at this betrayal from their youngest, their favorite. My father's face reddened. "This is absurd. We've given all of you every advantage, every opportunity." "But not equally," I insisted. "And when I try to point that out, you gaslight me. You tell me I'm being materialistic or ungrateful." "You never asked for anything," my mother exclaimed. "Daniel and Jessica always had specific requests, specific interests. You never seemed to want anything." "Did you ever consider that I stopped asking because I learned early on that my requests would be dismissed? That I stopped expressing interests because you never supported them the way you supported theirs?" My father waved his hand dismissively. "You seemed happy with what you got. You never complained." "Because I was trying to be the perfect daughter. Because I thought if I was good enough, accomplished enough, easy enough to deal with, you might finally see me the way you see them. But nothing was ever enough." The argument continued to escalate, with years of unspoken tension finally surfacing. My parents alternated between denial, justification, and attempts to make me feel guilty for being ungrateful. Daniel tried to play peacemaker, while Jessica, to my surprise, continued to confirm my perspective, sharing her own observations of the disparity in our treatment. Through it all, I maintained my resolve. When my mother tearfully asked, "How can you do this to us after everything we've done for you?" I responded with the truth. "I'm not doing anything to you. I'm doing something for myself. I'm not asking for gifts or money or special treatment. I'm asking for equal respect and love. And if I can't get that here, I need to create a life where I can find it elsewhere. By the end of the confrontation, nothing was resolved. My parents remained defensive, unable or unwilling to acknowledge the patterns I had pointed out. But I had said my piece, broken the silence that had surrounded our family dynamic for decades. And in doing so, I had freed myself from the obligation to pretend everything was fine when it wasn't. As I continued packing that evening, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and liberation. The family I had tried so hard to please to be perfect for was coming apart at the seams. But maybe that was necessary for something healthier to grow in its place. The day I moved into my apartment was bittersweet. Aunt Susan arrived early to help bringing coffee and bagels for breakfast before we started loading her SUV with my boxes. My parents had made a half-hearted offer to assist, which I politely declined. The idea of spending hours in a car with them pretending everything was normal after our confrontation was more than I could bear. Instead, I had accepted help from Aunt Susan, my friend Leah, and her boyfriend, who owned a pickup truck. They arrived in a small convoy, and we loaded my belongings efficiently. I had less than most people my age. Just my clothes books, a few pieces of furniture I'd purchased secondhand over the years, and personal items. The things that mattered to me fit comfortably in their vehicles. As we were making the final trip to my car, my mother appeared in the driveway looking uncertain. "I thought you might need these," she said, holding out a set of brand new towels and bed linens. A peace offering, perhaps, or simply an acknowledgement that I was really leaving. "Thank you," I said, taking them without meeting her eyes. The gesture was practical, thoughtful even, but it came too late and offered too little to heal the breach between us. My first week of independence was a roller coaster of emotions. There was exhilaration in setting up my space exactly as I wanted it, without considering anyone else's preferences or opinions. There was pride in handling the mundane aspects of adult life, setting up utilities, stocking my kitchen, establishing routines. But there was also grief. Despite everything, these were my parents, my family. The reality that our relationship might never be what I had hoped for was painful to accept. My phone buzzed constantly with messages and missed calls. My parents alternated between angry texts accusing me of being dramatic and divisive and pleading messages asking when I was coming to my senses and moving back home. I responded minimally, setting boundaries around when and how I was willing to communicate. It felt foreign and uncomfortable to assert myself this way, but also necessary for my mental health. The extended family had taken sides as families often do in conflicts. Aunt Susan was firmly in my corner, as was my grandmother, who had called to tell me she was disappointed it took you this long to stand up for yourself. But others were less supportive. My father's sister called to lecture me about respecting my parents and being grateful for all they had done for me. My cousin on my mother's side suggested I was making a mountain out of a molehill and should just get over it. About a week after I moved out, Daniel showed up at my apartment unannounced. I almost didn't answer the door, but curiosity won out. "Nice place," he said awkwardly, looking around the small living room. "Cozy." "Thanks," I replied, not inviting him to sit. "What are you doing here, Daniel?" He shifted uncomfortably. "I wanted to check on you, make sure you're okay. Mom and Dad are pretty upset." "I'm aware. They've made their feelings clear." "Look, Gabby, I know things got intense, but don't you think you're overreacting a bit? So they got you body wash for your birthday. Is that really worth blowing up the family over?" I stared at him, genuinely stunned by his inability to see the larger pattern. It wasn't about the body wash, Daniel. It was never about any single gift or incident. It's about 25 years of being treated as less valuable, less worthy of consideration and effort than you or Jessica. That's not fair. They love you. They paid for your education, supported your career choices. They did the bare minimum they felt obligated to do as parents. But they never went beyond that. Not the way they did for you and Jessica. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, clearly frustrated. I don't understand why you're so fixated on comparing what we got. Life isn't fair, Gabby. Different people get different things. Would you be saying that if our positions were reversed? If you had spent your entire life watching Jessica and me receive thoughtful, expensive gifts, while you got the equivalent of socks and school supplies? If you had to listen to explanations about how you were practical and didn't care about material things to justify being treated as an afterthought? His silence was answer enough. For all his intelligence, Daniel had been blind to his privilege within our family. Or perhaps he had seen it but chosen not to acknowledge it because doing so would require confronting uncomfortable truths about our parents and his own complicity in the dynamic. I need to get back to unpacking, I said finally. Thanks for checking in. After he left, I sat on my secondhand sofa and cried. Not because I regretted my decision, but because I mourned the relationship I wished we could have had. One where my brother understood my experience without me having to explain it, where he advocated for me rather than making excuses for our parents' behavior. That evening, Jessica called. Unlike Daniel's approach, she was immediately apologetic. I knew something was wrong, she said, her voice thick with tears. I always knew you were treated differently, but I didn't know what to do about it. I was just a kid, and then I was a teenager, and it just seemed like that was how things were. I'm so sorry, Gabby. Her acknowledgement was healing in a way I hadn't expected. It wasn't your responsibility to fix it, Jess. You were a child too. But I benefited from it. I got the trips, the experiences, the attention that should have been shared equally, and I never questioned it. That makes me part of the problem. We talked for almost 2 hours, Jessica listening as I shared how the years of differential treatment had affected me, my self-worth, my relationships. She shared her own perspective, the pressure she felt to live up to our parents' expectations, the discomfort she experienced witnessing the disparity in our treatment, the guilt she carried for accepting advantages I was denied. I want to do better, she said before we hung up. I want us to have a real relationship, one that isn't defined by mom and dad's weird dynamics. Is that possible? I think so, I replied, feeling a glimmer of hope. I'd like that. A few days later, a package arrived at my apartment. Inside was an expensive piece of jewelry, a diamond pendant that must have cost thousands. The card read simply, "We love you, Mom and Dad." I stared at it for a long time, a mixture of emotions swirling through me. They had missed the point so completely. This wasn't about the monetary value of gifts. It was about being seen, respected, considered with the same care they showed my siblings. Throwing money at the problem now only demonstrated how deeply they misunderstood what I had been trying to express. I carefully repackaged the pendant and sent it back with a note. This isn't about material things. It was Aunt Susan who suggested family therapy. They're never going to understand on their own, she said over coffee at my new place. They don't have the emotional tools or self-awareness. If you want any kind of relationship with them going forward, you need a professional mediator. I wasn't sure if therapy would help, but I was willing to try. To my surprise, my parents agreed, though I suspected they thought the therapist would take their side and help me see reason. The first session was tense. Dr. Levine, a family therapist with decades of experience, asked each of us to describe our perspective on the situation. My parents went first, portraying themselves as generous, loving parents, blindsided by an ungrateful daughter's sudden accusations. I followed calmly, outlining the pattern of favoritism I had observed throughout my life, providing specific examples and explaining how they had affected me. When Dr. Levine asked gentle but probing questions about these patterns, my parents grew defensive. We treated them according to their needs, my mother insisted. Gabriella was always independent, always had her head in a book. She didn't need the same things the others did. Did you ask her what she needed? Dr. Levine inquired. Or did you assume? The question hung in the air, unanswered. My father shifted uncomfortably in his seat. My mother's eyes filled with tears. Sometimes, Dr. Levine continued, we create narratives about our children early on. This one is athletic, this one is creative, this one is intellectual. And once those narratives are established, we view everything through that lens. We might miss when a child wants something different, something that doesn't fit the story we've told ourselves about who they are. My mother suddenly broke down. I was the least favorite, she said through sobs. In my family. My sister was the pretty one, the social one. I was the smart one, the responsible one. My parents never gave me the same attention they gave her. I swore I wouldn't do that to my children. The revelation stunned me. My mother, who had always seemed so confident, so certain of her place in the world, had carried her own wounds of favoritism. And somehow, unconsciously, she had recreated that dynamic in our family, casting me in the role she had played in her own childhood. My father reached for her hand, his own eyes wet. And I saw Gabriella as the strong one, he admitted, the one who didn't need coddling or special treatment. I thought I was respecting your independence, your maturity. I didn't realize. He turned to me. I didn't realize I was making you feel less loved. It wasn't a complete resolution. One therapy session couldn't undo years of established patterns or heal deep-seated wounds. But it was a beginning, a crack in the facade of denial that had characterized our family dynamic for so long. And for the first time, I felt seen by my parents. Really seen, not through the lens of who they had decided I was, but as the person I had become, despite that limitation. As we left the therapist's office, my mother reached for my hand. I hesitated, then allowed the contact. It was a small gesture, but it felt like the first tentative step on a long journey toward healing. In the months that followed, I focused on establishing my new life. I painted my apartment in soothing blues and greens colors I had always loved, but that my mother had dismissed as too cold for a girl's room. I bought plants, learning through trial and error which ones thrived in my care and which didn't survive my inconsistent watering schedule. I hung artwork that spoke to me, not expensive pieces, but prints and photographs that resonated with my aesthetic sensibilities. My doctoral program was demanding, but I thrived on the intellectual challenge and the sense of purpose it gave me. My research on the psychological impact of family dynamics felt deeply personal, now informed by my own experiences in ways that made my work more insightful and nuanced. My professors noticed, commending my ability to bring both academic rigor and emotional intelligence to complex psychological theories. Individual therapy became a cornerstone of my healing process. Dr. Chen, a compassionate but direct psychologist, helped me unpack the layers of self-doubt and unworthiness I had accumulated over years of subtle and not-so-subtle messages about my value within my family. What your parents did wasn't intentionally malicious, she reminded me once. But impact matters more than intent, and the impact on you was real and significant. Family therapy continued as well, with varying degrees of success. Some sessions ended in tears and recriminations, with my parents falling back into defensive postures and me retreating into hurt silence. Others yielded genuine insights and moments of connection. It was 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Progress measured not in dramatic breakthroughs, but in small shifts of understanding and awareness. My parents' initial attempts to fix the situation were predictably materialistic. They offered to buy me a car to pay off my student loans, to fund a vacation anywhere I wanted to go. We can't buy our way out of this, I told them firmly. Our relationship can't be measured in dollars or gifts. Gradually, painfully, they began to understand. My mother called one evening just to ask about my day, not to offer advice or criticism, but simply to listen. My father emailed to ask if I'd be interested in having dinner, just the two of us at a casual ramen place I had mentioned enjoying. Small gestures, but significant in what they represented, attempts to know me as I was not as they had imagined me to be. The most surprising transformation was in my relationships with my siblings. Daniel, after our initial confrontation, had clearly done some soul-searching. He invited me to coffee and, without prompting, acknowledged his blindness to his own privilege within our family. "I always knew I was the favorite," he admitted, "but I told myself it was because I needed more guidance, more structure. I never considered how it felt from your perspective." "It's not your fault," I told him. "You were a kid too. You didn't create the dynamic." "No, but I benefited from it, and I never questioned it or stood up for you. That's on me." Jessica and I grew closer than we had ever been. Without the shadow of our parents' favoritism between us, we discovered genuine common ground and mutual respect. "I always felt like a trophy daughter," she confessed during one of our regular sister nights. "Like my only value was in being artistic and pretty and sociable. It was exhausting trying to live up to their image of me." "I never realized you felt that way," I said, surprised. "From my perspective, you had it all: the attention, the support, the resources to pursue your interests." "I had the material things," she agreed, "but I never felt like I could just be myself. There was always this pressure to be the Jessica they expected. At least you got to develop your own identity, even if it came at a cost." Her perspective gave me pause. I had spent so many years envying my siblings' place in our family hierarchy that I had never considered the constraints that came with being the favorite. It didn't erase the pain of my experience, but it added complexity to my understanding of our shared family history. Together, the three of us began to form a united front in addressing the unhealthy dynamics of our upbringing. We supported each other in setting boundaries with our parents, celebrated each other's achievements without competition, and created new traditions that reflected our values rather than our parents' expectations. As Christmas approached, the first major holiday since our family confrontation, I felt a mixture of anxiety and hope. I had agreed to attend the family gathering, but with clear boundaries in place. I would come for dinner, but stay at a hotel rather than in my old room. I would participate in gift exchanges, but had requested that gifts be thoughtful rather than expensive, focused on personal meaning rather than monetary value. I also had an escape plan. Leah and her family had invited me to join their celebration if the family gathering became too difficult. Aunt Susan had offered her guest room if I needed a retreat. Having these options gave me the confidence to approach the holiday on my own terms without feeling trapped in old patterns. The days leading up to Christmas brought a familiar knot of tension to my stomach. Would anything really have changed? Or would I find myself once again swallowing hurt at the family dinner table, pretending everything was fine when it wasn't? Only time would tell. But regardless of how the holiday unfolded, I knew one thing with certainty: I would never again silence my own needs or accept less than I deserved in the name of keeping peace. That perhaps was the most valuable gift I had given myself in this year of painful growth and hard-won self-respect. Christmas Eve arrived with a light dusting of snow transforming Boston into a scene from a holiday card. I drove to my parents' house with a mixture of determination and trepidation, the trunk of my car filled with carefully chosen gifts. For Daniel, a first edition of a book by his favorite author that I had tracked down through a rare book dealer. For Jessica, art supplies from a small independent company that used sustainable materials. For my parents, a photo album I had painstakingly assembled, featuring pictures from throughout our lives together, the good times that had existed alongside the hurt. The house looked the same as it always had during the holidays. tastefully decorated with the expensive ornaments and garlands. My mother preferred the 15-foot tree in the foyer, dripping with crystal and gold. But something felt different as I stepped through the front door. The atmosphere was more subdued, less performative. My mother greeted me with a genuine hug rather than her usual air kiss. My father took my coat himself instead of directing me to the hall closet. "We're so glad you came," my mother said, and the simple sincerity in her voice caught me off guard. Dinner was traditional. Prime rib roasted potatoes, my grandmother's recipe for Yorkshire pudding. The conversation flowed more naturally than I had expected, focusing on genuine updates about our lives rather than the surface-level social chat that had characterized family gatherings in the past. When I mentioned an article I was working on for a psychology journal, my father asked thoughtful questions about my research methods. When I shared an anecdote about a challenging student in the undergraduate class I was TAing, my mother listened attentively instead of immediately offering solutions. After dinner, we gathered in the living room for the gift exchange, the part of the evening I had been both anticipating and dreading. Daniel and Jessica had clearly taken my request for thoughtfulness to heart. From Daniel, I received a membership to a local film society, remembering my love of independent cinema that I had rarely been able to indulge during college. From Jessica, a set of professional quality photography filters for the camera I had purchased myself years ago, acknowledging the passion I had maintained, despite lack of familial support. Then it was my parents' turn. My mother handed me a package wrapped in simple silver paper, her expression uncharacteristically nervous. I opened it slowly, steeling myself for disappointment while hoping for something different. Inside was a high-quality camera. Not the most expensive model on the market, but a significant upgrade from the second-hand one I had been using for years. It was exactly the one I had mentioned in passing months ago when my mother had asked what I might do if I had time for hobbies outside my studies. "You remembered?" I said softly, genuinely surprised. "We should have been paying attention all along," my father replied, his voice thick with emotion. "This doesn't make up for that. We know that. But we want you to know that we're listening now." It wasn't about the monetary value of the gift. It was what it represented. That they had listened, remembered, considered what would bring me joy, rather than what they thought I needed or deserved. That they had put the same thought and care into my gift that they had always put into my siblings. After the gifts were opened and the dessert plates cleared away, my parents asked if they could speak with me privately. We moved to my father's study, a room that had always intimidated me as a child, with its leather-bound books and imposing desk. "We owe you an apology," my mother began, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "A real one, not just for the gifts or the specific incidents you've pointed out, but for failing to see you as you are. We had narratives about each of you," my father continued, echoing what our therapist had identified. "Daniel was the one who needed structure and discipline. Jessica was the creative spirit who needed nurturing. And you, we saw you as the self-sufficient one, the one who had it all figured out. We thought we were respecting your independence, but really we were using it as an excuse to put less effort into understanding you." "That doesn't make it right," my mother added. "But we want you to know that we're committed to doing better, to really seeing you, Gabriella, to being the parents you deserved all along." I felt tears well up, years of longing for this acknowledgement finally being fulfilled. "Thank you," I said simply. "That's all I ever wanted, to be seen, to be valued equally." The conversation wasn't a magical resolution to years of hurt. There would still be missteps, moments of falling back into old patterns, work to be done on all sides. But it was a genuine beginning, an opening toward a new kind of relationship, based on mutual respect, rather than prescribed roles and expectations. As I drove back to my apartment that night, I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this point. The years of silent hurt, the courage it had taken to finally speak up, the painful process of setting boundaries and demanding respect, the slow, halting steps toward healing and understanding. I had learned so much in the process. That self-worth isn't determined by how others treat you, but by the standards you set for yourself and the boundaries you maintain. That standing up for yourself is necessary even when it's painful, even when it disrupts the status quo. That real change requires honesty and willingness to be uncomfortable. That forgiveness is possible, but shouldn't be rushed or given before genuine amends are made. That family relationships can be healed, but must be based on mutual respect. I had also gained a new perspective on gift-giving and what it represents. It's not about the price tag or the brand name. It's about the thought, the attention, the desire to bring joy to another person. My parents' camera wasn't meaningful because it was expensive, but because it represented a shift in how they saw me. Not as the practical, low-maintenance daughter who didn't need or deserve special consideration, but as a person with passions and desires worthy of recognition and support. In the months that followed, I continued to build my life on my own terms. I excelled in my graduate program, developed my photography skills, strengthened friendships that nourished me, and maintained healthier boundaries with my family. My relationship with my parents improved gradually, with setbacks along the way, but an overall trajectory toward greater understanding and respect. Daniel and Jessica and I grew closer than ever, our shared experience of confronting family dysfunction, creating a bond that transcended the old dynamics of competition and comparison. We became allies in maintaining healthier patterns, calling out problematic behavior when it emerged, supporting each other's independence while celebrating our connection. As for me, I found a peace within myself that had always eluded me before. I no longer measured my worth by my parents' recognition or compared myself to my siblings. I learned to value myself, to trust my perceptions, to believe that I deserved to be treated with consideration and respect. The little girl who had silently accepted less in hopes of eventually earning equal love had grown into a woman who knew her value wasn't determined by others' ability to see it. The body wash sits on a shelf in my bathroom, a reminder not of hurt, but of how far I've come. From accepting less than I deserved to building a life rich in genuine connection and self-respect. It was a difficult journey, but one worth taking. Because in the end, the most important gift I could give myself was the courage to say, I deserve better. And I'm no longer afraid to ask for it. Have you ever had to stand up to your family about unfair treatment? How did you handle it, and what boundaries did you set to protect your self-worth? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might help someone else who's struggling with similar issues. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more authentic stories about family dynamics and personal growth. And don't forget to share this video with someone who might need to hear that they deserve equal love and respect. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, you are worthy of being truly seen exactly as you are.